What's up, adventurers? Today we're going to be going through a video talking about healers. It's been a while since we've gotten to read, just kind of get a reading of the room to see how healers are doing. So this video is going to cover a little bit of that, covering something that happened 2 weeks ago, from a week ago till just yesterday. So we're going to go and just kind of get an idea of how they're feeling in the game, mostly in Mythics, because that's just where people post the most in that. But of course, if there's something I missed, let me know in chat. And if there's something we want me to cover, a specific class or a specific role in the game, let me know, and I would love to cover it in a future video. But until then, let's jump into this video. This first post was from 2 weeks ago. It says, why is Blizzard not looking at fixing one of the main problems, lacks of tanks and healers? They are making big change to the Mythic Plus system for the third season in a row. They are also looking at making changes to the raid vis-a-vis add-ons and redesigning swirlies and mechanics. Now, I have heard about this report. I don't have a specific article, but from what I've seen, people are saying that basically add-ons are going to be less present in the sense that they're not as needed. You can get away with it more often. And then two, there's a lot of swirlies around there, and there's not great definition on those. Sometimes they have big rings, but then a lot of times as well, it's not very clear because there's so many. There's so much clutter. You're already dealing with so much AoE damage, and it's already affecting healers. But a lot of those swirlies are one shots. You know, now you have conals that are one shots that are not well defined all the time, and then same thing with swirlies. Sometimes big swirlies just happen, like in Grim Batal. So this is important. You know, it's important that these things are changing. However, all modes lack healers, PvP and PvE, and tanks. Mythic Plus, it doesn't matter how good the game gets if you can't actually play it. I will say, having played DPS for the past little while, gosh, it is rough being a tank. But my biggest woe is like Arakara, City of Echoes. If you haven't gone through it, basically it's a first boss killer. Like if you're not doing the first boss right, it kills the group. And I know that's like, well, that's all Mythics. This is the most that is that case. And the thing is, if you don't get killed by that first boss, that last boss can end you too. So it's like one of the most brutal. Like I would say second boss, not as bad, right? You know, like there's not, at least it's like an arc, I suppose. But man, I struggle the most. I know my lowest Mythic Plus clear is on Arakara, City of Echoes. I don't know if it's just me, but man, and it's brutal how much tanks have to deal with it, but it's also a pain just because the pulling that you do in that is specifically tougher for healers because it is made like the mobs are made not to be pulled together, but in order to make time, you know, want to get those plus clears, you got to pull them in unison. So like it requires a lot of CCs and a lot of interrupts and a lot of self-reliance as well. I know I said the second boss is easier in Arakara, but at the same time, you have to be on it because there's a lot of spiky damage in that dungeon. So it's a lot. So this comment says, started expansion as tank, when healer, now came back now as DPS. Aside from waiting an extra 5 minutes for Mythic Plus, it's so brain dead and fun. Did a +3 and basically questing gear. Close to 1 mil DPS on packs, no stress, just to get to press my buttons. And I think that extends a bit further into later keys as well. I think +3 is kind of low, but that's still kind of what it is. What's your suggestion to fix it? Bring old tanks back and buff healers. I mean, I do agree. I mean, this is me being biased. I do think that tank self-reliance is important to all this. I think if you want to make it to where healers can really have flexibility, then you give tanks more self-reliance. You just add more self-sustain into their natural rotations, so it's not as needed, or those spikes don't feel as spiky. So that's my thoughts on that. But I mean, will that happen? I mean, it's contradictory to what has been done, but it's in line with what they said they were going to do months ago. So I mean, like what do we go off of? I don't know. So yeah, so what are they doing with swirlies and raid? Looking at changing the mechanics so they don't require add-ons necessarily, and then also changing the graphic for swirlies so the edge is more well defined. Simple quality life updates that I think are good. You know, it is a solid one. I don't understand the mission with Mythic Plus anymore. They make it harder, more boring and lower item level. In Dragonflight, at least it was fun to do massive pulls and people actually wanted to play. Now you got to sweat for worse gear and kill 4 mobs at a time because you might get one shot in your tank. Exactly. So I think it's it's removing the fun out of it, because the fear is that like, oh, it's just all big AoE pools. Like if it's fun, just let let it happen. And the reality of it is, the higher you gear, the more you're gonna get people who want to do those big pools still. But it's less viable now. So it's like setting expectations too high, and also too high for healers who struggle a lot. I know we say a lot here that, you know, tanks are the first ones to get blamed. No, I think the when tanks don't do well, the group disbands. But really, the most clears, you know, cleared mythics that, you know, don't go well, you know, maybe average, the healer's the one to get blamed. So it's a rough situation out there. So that was from 2 weeks ago. This one is from 6 days ago. So just curious if anyone finding that Mythic Plus is more difficult for healers this season. Since they nerfed tank survivability, yeah, it's a real issue. Once again, that tank survivability being that main crux of the issue seems to be coming up a lot. I can't decide if it's harder, but I definitely enjoyed it less in this season than any in Dragonflight. Wow, that's a big comparison. Seems like almost everyone has found this season less enjoyable. At first, I thought maybe it was just getting over the game. Then I started reading my thoughts were shared by my thoughts were shared by a lot of others. Really hoping that season 2 gets it right. I don't know. I honestly think that the specs that are the most necessary have it the hardest, and that makes sense. But accessibility or mastery isn't a clear cut. I mean, sometimes it's just patting down your rotation. It just seems like now what's so important in the game is mastering the perfect rotation and doing it every single time, all the time. But so many things are meant to take you off center and ruin that rotation. So it feels bad whenever you can have one pull and you're topping DPS, you're doing great on healing, and then the next pull you're not so much. So it feels like there's a lack of consistency, and just like how damage is dealt to us in a spiky way, it feels like the damage we deal out, the healing we deal out, how well we're tanking is, you know, it's very spiky. So it doesn't feel consistent, and because of that, that it just feels very RNG, and it feels kind of like there's a reason why we feel this way, and it's because it's very RNG and it feels very unfair. And it's not entirely anybody's fault. I think that any good healer knows that it's never entirely their fault in a situation like this. Now, is a healer able to offset those faults that people make? Of course, but I think that the lack of consistency and the amount of spikiness to that is a large reason to it. And it's why a lot of people have discontinued playing healing, in my opinion. So it was definitely noticeably more annoying for me as Holy Priest, as usual. Lots of unavoidable AoE, random tank busters, and more random dispels I can't deal with. Can't wait for season 2 with even more tanks, busters, unavoidable AoE, and random other stuff. Yeah, it seems like we're just putting more and more onto the screen to where it's visually atrocious. Where we're not going, let's nerf anybody. It's like, well, people are clearing this at too high a level, so we need to make it to where it's impossible for anyone to do exceedingly well. Like, your ability is here, but the max you're going to be able to perform due to affixes and mechanics of the dungeon is here. With your ability to like sneak in those higher bits of DPS as like a chance of RNG due to mechanics or how well your tank is doing, or maybe how well your healer is doing. It feels very RNG how well you can perform, even if you perform the same across. It changes too often. It's definitely a season where you need players that are good at the game and to play anything serious. Surviving as a tank is hard. Mobs won't stop chain casting if you don't have actual good coordination. I will say that has been a frustrating part about tanking. I will say, being a DPS, having basically 3 potential interrupts is fantastic. That's really tough to do whenever you're basically just slamming GCDs back to back to back, while spamming ignore pains as a tank, and it just becomes very hard to do any interrupts. I want to be more effective at that, but it feels like now, because mastering your rotation is so essential, I'm basically slamming buttons no matter what spec I am as a warrior, because yes, there's a brain dead aspect to it, in that you're slamming the same buttons in some cases, but sometimes you're literally popping all your cooldowns in unison or in a chained way so you can get like the most uptime for the most damage, that you just have no time to cast something else, or by doing so you're actively hindering your own DPS. So it's like it's a tough balance, but I don't like that it's that way. Now, do I like it the classic way where you're having to wait for rage? Of course not. But do I like it the way where I'm having to basically like constantly slam buttons, and as I'm pressing that button, I'm thinking of the next button to press and slam, and just keep on pressing, and then switch again, and then switch again. Like it's just constantly just does that over tapping, and it just feels like I'm slowly developing arthritis as I play the game. So, and then this post is 22 hours ago. It says how to enjoy Mythic as a healer. Just coming back to WoW after a few expansions got away. Got my main full hero gear, mostly fully upgraded with 636 craft weapon. So I wanted to do high Mythic Plus to help gear my vault and upgrade crest, since I can only do heroic grade once a week. And how do people enjoy these? Healing them is the single most stressful and infuriating experience I've had in WoW. I remember doing Mythic dungeons before Dragonflight, and I don't remember them being this rage inducing. So to all my fellow healers, how do you find enjoying healing in high tier Mythic Plus? Is it possible? In my opinion, it's all about knowledge. Once you get that down, most of the boss fights and plus are just a dance. You execute, others are pure chaos. If you know that, you can prepare for that. The process of climbing up the Mythic Plus keys feels rewarding for me in the War Within because of how difficult it felt. It's all about learning what I did wrong, queuing again, and trying to do fix. I would say this feels mostly right. I want to agree with this in most of a regard. However, I think it kind of ignores the fact that you could do everything right, but as a healer, there's simply things you can't avoid. Like that's something that watching a lot of classic hardcore has taught me, is that there's a lot of situations that people say like, oh, the healer could have done this, healer could have done that. But in reality, things just happen too fast, and spikes happen too fast, especially if people make mistakes. So I don't think it's best to beat yourself up about those things, or to be like, oh, this is my fault because I don't have this mastered yet. I do think part of Mythics, as much as people probably hate for me to say it, I think part of it is kind of learning on the job, because you have to learn where you don't do well, or you just actively have that self-reflection and just realize that you're not doing well. That's the neat part. You don't enjoy Mythics, I see. Yes, healing has consistently gotten more stressful for years and years, with incoming damage getting more bursty and more punishing. Blizzard keeps saying that they want to address it, and they continue to make it worse. It's not just a vibes thing. The ratio of healer heals per second to player HP right now is about the highest it's ever been, and the same is true for ratio of incoming DPS to player HP. That is, players die faster, more fast than ever. This means that you as a healer have to consistently yo-yo everyone's health bar, and slipping up for a few seconds means someone dies. Yeah, I mean, once again, playing as DPS, it's when you're not the main priority, because I played tank so often, you realize how often your health can sit pretty low, even with a good healer. Sometimes things are just kind of rough, and you have to make up for that with a lot more like self-sustain if you can. I would say that eventually that comes to a point where you simply won't make it, because you're going to get some sort of AoE DPS or AoE hit on you from a boss, unfortunately. But it's just kind of it is what it is on that. But yeah, it's very unfortunate, like how much you'll see everyone's health, and it gets kind of scary. So it's got to be stressful. I can't imagine it not being stressful. You don't really see, I don't. I'm a Mistweaver, and it's more stressing than Mythic raiding. Don't play a dungeon with a bunch of heal absorb curses when you can't dispel curses. Such bad design. Enjoy the ability to run more keys than DPS can. Yeah, I mean, the benefit to being a healer, I suppose, is that it is pretty easy to gear, considering that you're available for everything. Honestly, you're doing better than me. I'm a 625 Mistweaver monk with a 627 Preservation Evoker. Alt looking to get some 8s for the vault and crest, despite having every dungeon on a 9 on both characters and the rating to match. People would rather wait in the queue for an extra 10 minutes for someone else. Most often the disc priest, in my experience, watching my application is not getting accepted or rejected. Yeah, it's kind of strange. I would say it's tough being the non-meta when there's such a clear meta. I know this is like a balancing thing for the most part. Like it's not one particular area of the game, but I think the hard part about not playing an optimal class, because I play a non-optimal class. I mean, I'm kind of middle of the road, maybe slightly above it at times, it feels like. Even with that being the case, you can definitely tell when people are queuing for meta, or they're like, the way they queue is they'll queue like something like, it'll be like a healer and 2 DPS. they'll queue specifically to try to like bait those meta classes to come in. And you can always see it, you can always detect it. So, or you can queue something as a DPS and you're like, yeah, I'm not getting into this. I can tell, I can see why by their comp, but they're not going to. Don't pug play with the group. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's true. I think that a lot of it could be alleviated by a group, or like even like a Discord or something like that. I think the reality of it is that we shouldn't depend on people playing in groups, like dedicated groups or guild groups, or forming parties in Discord, etc., to do so, at least until I would say like 10 plus. I think it's doable to do like 10s for sure. You might have some like friction starting with like 8s, but I think it definitely is possible. I think we should make at least up until a certain point doable with pugs. I think a lot of people have too, so I think that's reasonable. Maybe beyond that's a bit tough. You're missing the relevant information. What is your class? What's your exact item level? What's a high mythic by your definition? If you're just completing +8 to 10s to get crest vault gear, as you say, healing shouldn't be too stressful. I disagree about this. I think everyone has a different definition of difficulty. I think that 8s are above average, 9s can be difficult, 10s are hard. So I think people underestimate how challenging that is for players, especially players, because I think you can start like really doing 10s like well before 619, you know. So I think it's doable and achievable. And I think people go, well, I have maxed out gear, so 10s are easy. It's like, yeah, you know, from your perspective, maybe. So I've been healing since TBC, always with a passion motivation. For season 2, I have put my healers on the shelf. Wow, and will play DPS. Pains me, but I am very much done. It's also the first time I did not bother getting my rating, which normally I had it in a very short time after a season starts. So the answer, as many say, is you don't. From what I see from the big guys on the tube, season 2 will not be any better for healers. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the unfortunate reality that we're slowly approaching, is that it may not get much better. Is this enough of an epidemic of a lack of healers for for there to be any active change? I don't know. I think Blizzard is in a state right now where they look so far in the future, they forget about the present. And it kind of has been that way for a long time, where it feels like you can have a screaming like in PTR, like, hey, this isn't how we want it, like this isn't a problem. And then in the like once these go live, then we're like, hey, like we were saying before, this is a problem, this isn't good. And then the next season comes along like it is now, and people are like seriously, stop, like this is a problem. But do the numbers reflect that? I don't really know. I mean, maybe it's skewed just because statistically there's always less tanks and healers by comparison. Obviously there's if you think about any comp, I mean, it's obviously going to have 1 tank, 1 healer, and then for raids, you know, you're 2 3 12, I think it is 2 3 9, something like that. So it's maybe it's just that, maybe it's just our comps, but it does feel like it. I would say, like, if we're just going off of a vibe check, I think it does feel like it. That's the kind of the unfortunate part. So my honest solution to this, you know, if we're proposing solutions and pie in the sky ideas, I do think tank self-sustain was the way to do it. I think a lot of people go, well, healers were saying that they were tired of DPSing and they wanted to make it harder, so now it's harder, so you get what you ask for. I disagree. I think that more difficulty for healers doesn't necessarily make it absolutely painful. Like there's spectrums to this, and it's kind of like from one extreme to the next. I think you don't have to nerf classes to make other classes have a more challenging and like fulfilling experience. There's ways to do that without doing everything they've done in this season / expansion. So that's my thoughts on it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of the ways that we can help healers sort of rise up a bit more in the queues, so they're more present? Same with tanks. You know, I know it's mostly about healers, but I mean, same with tanks. You know, tanks experience a lot of the same woes as healers, just in a different role in the game. So let me know in the comments. And of course, like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the page, check out our twitch.tv/ShawnSetGO and follow us there for whenever we go live. We have these discussions live. We talk about these things, and I'm always open to asking questions or answering questions, as well as running mythics with viewers and stuff like that. So I'm always open to that. Now, as far as content goes, I may be jumping into Plunderstorm soon. So I may be trying out that as well. But until next time, catch you on the next one. Peace.